New Buena. Doesn't.
In the last video, we discussed the possibility of experiencing a thoughtless state without having to have a confirmatory thought. In this video, I'm going to talk about the next step that typically occurs once somebody has achieved this thoughtless state, and more importantly, learned to achieve this state and return to it predictably. This typically comes after either pretty intensive self-inquiry or when someone has merged completely with a koan like mu, or with the breath work, or with a mantra. So there are kind of two ways to find yourself in this state, or to lead yourself to this state. One is through inquiry or questioning, and the other is through a sort of radical immersion. Either way, what underlies that movement is a deep burning to know, a powerful yearning to get to the root of identity and then pluck up that root, to pull back the curtain and see the wizard. Without this powerful yearning to get to the root of suffering, or to pull back the veils that have been in front of your face or in front of your eyes for so long, you'll usually just grab the next life preserver of thought. But once you've decided that this is the most important thing for you, it doesn't take that long to find this place of pure consciousness, pure being, unsullied by thoughts. So once you arrive here, what do? What's the next step? Well, I should say that this doesn't always play out the same for everybody. Some people plunge through this whole cascade in an instant. It's just a movement of surrender, of letting go. And you just sort of fall inward. But I'm not sure you can force that to happen. It just seems to happen for some people. So when that doesn't happen, and you find yourself with this ability to stay in the thoughtless state, or stay in this state of pure I or I am, pure knowing without an object of knowing, then it's reasonably predictable what's going to come next. And that is, once you've uprooted the subtle thoughts like, okay, I get here and I always get stuck and nothing happens, right? That's often the thought that catches you. Once you've learned to uproot that thought and the subtle practice-based thoughts and conclusions that you're using as a life preserver, and you truly are able to just rest in this unconditioned consciousness, this thoughtless space, pure I am sense, then it's just a matter of time before the fear barrier comes. And sometimes it's rather pronounced. Sometimes it really feels like you're going to die, or the body feels like it's truly terrified, like you're standing at the edge of a cliff. So what do you do here? What is the practice? Well, when I'm working with somebody who comes up against this, I usually say something along the lines of this. This is a physiologic response. The body is responding to what it considers a threat, an existential threat. This is not a threat to the body, but it's a threat to the mind-identified self, or the sense of identity that's tied into thoughts and concepts. We become so addicted to thought that when we move beyond thought, our body actually interprets it as a threat to our life. So it's really just a marker of how addicted to thoughts we've become. But the body does experience it often as intense fear. And what that feels like is a rapid heart rate, sweating, maybe shaking. The key to this is just use the common sense test of asking yourself, is there a threat to my life here? Notice you're just sitting in a room. There's no threat. The threat is in the mind. So anything in addition to this physiologic response is a thought. The existential fears, the narratives about this might kill me or make me go crazy, or I don't know what's beyond this, so I better turn back. Those are all thoughts. Thoughts, thoughts, thoughts. Now, since you've trained yourself to come to this thoughtless space, you just continue to do it through this fear barrier. That's really all there is to it. Now, it doesn't always work that well the first time. You may come up against this fear barrier, and even though you've heard me say it several times, it still surprises you because it feels very real, very like a true physical threat. And that's surprising. So the first time you come in contact with this, often you will back off and not be able to maintain the concentration or presence of no thought. And that's fine, of course. So I've had many people tell me that actually, that even though they've heard me say it was going to come, they were surprised how intense it was. So here's the really good news. You know that there's no physical threat. You know that this is a predictable and expected physical experience. So the next time you come in contact with this, it'll be easier. In fact, it might not even be there, but it might be. So in my experience, after coming in contact with this a handful of times, it subsides. Sometimes it subsides in the midst of one of the physical experiences, and sometimes you just notice it's not there when you direct yourself to this thoughtless space. But either way, just know that it won't come every time. At some point, the body will learn that this is not an actual existential threat. It's a psychological threat. It's a fear. It's a door with someone standing there saying, don't open the door. And as soon as you open the door and walk through, you realize there was nothing to fear on the other side. So it's okay. Now, this may not play out exactly like this for you. The barrier may be a different type of emotion. It may be grief or it may be anger, but there's often a barrier emotion here. Now, it may even be the case that there is no barrier emotion and you're looking for one and it's not there. In which case, that's fine. You don't need to think about it or wonder what went wrong. Just stay in that thoughtless space. So once you've gone through this fear barrier, or it's kind of reared its head and you've backed off or patted it on the head and it calmed down and you're on the other side of it and things feel very calm and you're able to return to this thoughtless space or nearly thoughtless space. But the point is you're not identifying with any thoughts at all and resting in the pure knower. The consciousness that doesn't need to be conscious of, it's conscious only of itself. And as you rest in this and return to this again and again, it usually feels even calmer than it did before the fear barrier. It's a degree even more simple, neutral, obvious, relaxed, and contentless. So then what do you do now? You do nothing. Stay here. Don't worry about expecting anything. once you're authentically able to lead yourself here, often it's so enjoyable to not be beat up by thoughts and pushed around by your own mind that it's intrinsically enjoyable just to sit with this. So in and of itself, it's a perfect practice. Just stay with it. Don't worry about expecting something to come or any of that, because those are all thoughts anyway, right? So we just stay here. This is the practice. It's simple. And then at some point, this may or may not happen, but it typically does if you're truly remaining in a thoughtless state. Something else will start to come online or be noticed. It's very hard to talk about this because it's altogether beyond the human dimension. I'll just say that. It's unexpected. And again, this is not just my own experience. This is a culmination of many people going through this, and it's reasonably predictable. They'll say to me, I thought that pure consciousness or that pure presence, that really peaceful state of no thought was awakening, or I thought that was the whole point. And in a sense it is. But when this comes, they will often say something like, there's no way to expect that. It's not expectable because it's not knowable. And yet it's even more intimate in a strange way. It's the inside and the outside intermixed or intertwined. It's eternity and the timeline intertwined. It's your life as you know it and unfiltered reality intermixed, intertwined in a way that's indescribable. And even these descriptions are really falling short. One person I was interacting with not too long ago said it felt like a wormhole. He said, yeah, I really thought I had gone through all the barriers, the fear barrier, de-identified from thoughts, and come to this place where there was true peace, this pure consciousness. I can't remember if that's the word he used, but he was there. And he said, and then the wormhole opened. And I realized, oh, this is a whole different dimension, right? This is awakening. This is when awakening really, I guess you could say, begins. But this is the opening. And you may have a different kind, it may not be fear here. It's just this almost recoil from the complete unknowability of it all. Or you may not. You may just be in wonder because it is wondrous and sublime. So just know that the whole bottom can drop out. And that's more like what awakening is. But I'm cautious to use all these words and descriptions because I don't want to give you something to wait for or anticipate. I just want to give you the general sense of the movements that occur as this plays out. But the key really is to get yourself into that thoughtless state, into that peaceful, unbound conscious experience. I have many videos and pointings on this. And then just stay with it. That's it. And then let things play out as they will. And just know there may be some unexpected twists and turns. But it all comes to a good place.